Howdy, I'm Tyler Saney, and growing plants is super fun, right? Oh, the joy that comes from seeing your palm tree finally mature and give you some authentic Florida man, tossing in your homegrown plum tomatoes to finish off some steamy raccoon stew, and eating those fresh walnuts that break your teeth is unparalleled. But sometimes I have to admit, y'all, like everyone, I make mistakes. And I did it, guys. I planted some mint into the ground. Now, the thing about mint is that once you put it into the musty, dusty Texas dirt hoping it grows super well. And you get happy that at least something is putting all that oil residue in your backyard to good use. But the thing is that it keeps growing and growing until eventually your entire yard turns into a green carpet of these things, constantly making everything smell like your mom's scented breath. Mint is what we call an invasive species, which is basically when dumb, stinky monkey people during their dumb, stinky monkey adventures take something from one place and put it somewhere where it shouldn't be, and it grows out of control, invading the entire landscape. Now, most of the time, this isn't a problem, like my Meemaw trying to grow tropical banana trees up in the Yukon tundra. But what if you brought those same banana plants in Puerto Rico, and it's like, sweet, this is just like home, except no one knows how to deal with me, and starts growing everywhere like crazy because they got no restrictions, like a rabid Alabamian in any place without a 50-foot steak on the menu. One of the worst invasive species in history was a chestnut blight, a horrible parasitic fungus that brutally murders chestnut trees, also known by the chestnut tree population as the end of times. So before the 1900s, American forests used to be full of chestnut trees, these absolutely massive trees that produce these nicely shaped nuts called, you guessed it, chestnuts, that it would drop in hundreds down to the ground, where it became an important source of food for Native Americans and animal populations as a hearty form of food full of juicy nutrients and calories. And when white people started settling the eastern seaboard where these trees grew, they realized that their wood was super strong and resistant to decay. At one point, it was estimated there were 4 billion chestnut trees in the U.S., producing a massive amount of chestnuts that were being shipped out to all major cities as a food source. And high-quality chestnut wood was used in construction all across the nation. So everything's looking pretty good, right? Not for long, because as we say in Texas, good things are usually ruined by the Yankees. So incidentally, there are a separate set of chestnut species grown all the way over in Japan and China, called the Asian chestnut trees, which are kind of like the long-lost cousins of the American ones, who happen to get frequently sick from this parasitic fungus, which essentially latches onto the tree, eats away completely through a certain portion of the stem, which then by virtue of now and through one level of the tree, kills the whole goddamn tree, similar to how us Texans blast things with our own tools. Now, the Asian trees are immune to this, because these two organisms have been constantly at war with each other for the past millennia. So that seems cool, right? And then a Yankee, doing his usual yanking, thought, hey, we have all these beautiful American chestnut trees, so why don't we bring in some Asian ones so that they can be best buds? Well, big mistake, because unfortunately, American trees don't have the slightest bit of immunity towards this fungi. And with one accidental Asian chestnut tree with blight being introduced into the Yankee capital of New York, it was Armageddon. Within 40 years of the introduction of the blight, the American chestnut tree became extinct. Yeah, extinct, gone, nada. Well, technically functionally extinct, because the sad thing is, they're not extinct, because you can still kind of grow American chestnut trees, and they do sprout saplings back because their roots aren't affected by the disease, but once they hit tree adolescence, the blight kills them instantly. Forests all throughout the country had huge empty spots in them for years because all these trees just decided to all die at once. People soon started forgetting what chestnuts even were because they hadn't eaten one in such a long time, and the wood became so rare that people started stealing them off of old barns. Thanks, Yankees, for literally wiping an entire species off the face of God's green earth. Super messed up, right? But you know what else is messed up? Rabbits. Now, don't you bring up all that nonsense about rabbits being so cute and cuddly when we all know that they're secretly monsters from the deepest pits of hell trying to masquerade as these innocent little things. Well, at least Australians can live that nightmare. So Australia is a really unique place, right? We all know that. It's basically a massive island separated from the rest of the world by a significant amount of water. I mean, it's huge. Like, if you thought Texas was big, you can fit like 10 Texases into Australia. It's isolated, and it's been that way for a long-ass time. So naturally, the continent has all manner of unique critters that are only found there and nowhere else. A delicate environment formed over millennia, containing animals like cute koala bears to buff kangaroos and snakes with deadly laser eyes. But nothing compares to the hordes of European rabbits mowing down everything in their way. By current estimates, there are 250 million rabbits in Australia, and that's the reduced population. In the early 19th century, it used to be, get this, 10 billion. 10 billion rabbits spreading to every corner of this country. And we can all thank one stinky human for his superb service, Thomas Alston. And apart from the fact that he named himself after a glorious capital, I don't think I like anything else about this man. Apparently he liked hunting rabbits back in England so much, he was like, let me just release them in Australia. What's the worst that could happen? Everything. Because rabbits allow and have 5 kids to litter and constantly have litters all year round in the mild Australian climate. And then soon, the 24 rabbits that he released became 10 billion within a few decades. And there just isn't anything that eats them in Australia. They don't have any kind of predation, so their population just explodes with nothing hunting them. They're somehow super adaptable, so they can live in everything from rainforests to deserts. And they had plentiful food in the form of the Europeans mowing down the entire Australian landscape to be one large grass lawn. So obviously people were like, this is a huge problem, because having 10 billion rabbits roaming the land and being so ravenous to the point that there's barely any food for everything else is a bad thing, right? Hilariously, they thought their best solution was to build a giant wall to try and stop them from going into the western portion of the country. And that went as well as you think it did. Mac, I think we're almost done with this wow. Just 2 more miles to go and we're done. Oh no. And they also tried the next best thing, eating them as a cheap source of meat during depressions by the bucket load. Martha, how many times are you going to make rabbit stew? I'm literally turning into a rabbit. Not even the slightest, tiniest, goddamn itty-bitty dent in their population. What about indiscriminately machine gunning them down, slashing at them with fire machetes, poisoning everything inside? Buddy, you're just starting to make a visible scratch. And oh, no, she's up again. Eventually, Australians got pretty tired of this and just had some super smart science people get together and try and come up with a solution. And they were like, why don't we bring in this myxoma virus from South America that only kills rabbits and introduce it here? And that was Judgment Day for rabbits. The population fell drastically, dropping almost 99% within a few years. So, problem solved, right? We can pat ourselves in the back, dust our hands. No, you can't do that. Because the thing is, they still weren't able to wipe these out completely, because this virus could only spread by mosquitoes. And so in some of the driest places of the country that somehow rabbits survived in, they just continued to and eventually we have a population of 200 million today, with some of these being immune to this new disease. That's tough, I guess. It seems like Australia as a country is one that's just controlled by their invasive species overlords. We got invasive rabbits. We had cane toads introduced to kill another invasive species, but became invasive species themselves. We got invasive foxes. We got invasive rats. We got invasive cats, and even invasive camels released by people exploring the Australian deserts. I wish you luck, Australia. I truly do. Maybe you just need more guns. Sincerely, from a Texan. But there's something that even a Texan can't shoot with their guns. And that's these wonderful things that kind of screwed over the Great Lakes. These little striped rock-licking things that are called zebra mussels. Because, you know, they got some cool stripes on them. Zebra mussels are native to freshwater lakes in Russia and Ukraine. And the real neat thing about them is that they like to stick onto everything. And even though they absolutely can't tolerate salt water, their microscopic babies somehow find their way onto the ballast water of traveling ships, which is basically the water that these ships take in to maintain stability at sea when they first leave. And they can live in this ballast water for a couple of weeks. And so when the stinky ape man drives his big boat with a bunch of these things in a ship to the Great Lakes in the U.S. and goes, you know, shit gets bamboozled. And these things are everywhere in the Great Lakes. You got zebra mussels on the docks, zebra mussels on the water lock, smothering dams and crowding out other clams, cutting feet and threatening the supply of hydroelectricity, and outcompeting everything in remotely the same ecological niche, and overall destabilizing the entire Great Lakes because these things literally blanket everything. Now, normally things like birds would eat these mussels back in their homeland and would control the population, but here, the birds are stupid, and they don't eat it because they don't recognize it. And you might ask, is there any way to control them? Well, yes and no. They're pretty much the reason why if you want to take any boats into any lake, you have to make sure the boats are cleaned so thoroughly to the point where you'd be willing to have open heart surgery on them, because even a tiny microscopic amount of water could have these things just swimming in there ready to infect some other body of water. You can also boil the water to a balmy 100 degrees to try and kill them, but yeah, that probably wouldn't be too good for other wildlife, and it's not like you can just put a whole lake on a stovetop and just boil it. You can also try nets to try and stop them from going to places, or you can try and blast strong-ass UV light into the lakes, or literally try and suffocate them by throwing blankets on top of them. But even these are only meant to control the spread and the sheer amount of these things, and really can't completely rid the lakes of mussels. So next time you go to the lake and see one of these things, don't think there's some precious native wildlife that needs to be protected. Chuck them, step on them, shoot at them, bomb them, do whatever you want with them, because they're not supposed to be there, and you'll be doing your right part to make it right. I'm just kidding. Leave that up to the professionals. Please, I don't want to get sued. Anyways, got to make sure that mint outside doesn't get too out of hand with the old trusty dusty dig them out of the roots technique. Oh boy, I already hear it growing outside. Until then, I'll catch you all in the next one. Ugh.